At Option Genius, we believe that you deserve freedom, financial freedom, so that you have no more worries and more than enough money. Time freedom, so that you could do what you want, when you want to do it. And choice freedom, to live your life on your terms. But the system and Wall Street are rigged against us little guys. So how do we fight back? Well, my friend, that's what this podcast is all about. My name is Alan Sama, and this is the Option Genius Podcast. Hey there, Option Nation. How are you doing today? This is Alan back with another interesting episode. Today I have an awesome guest with me. I have Mr. Chris Miles from MoneyRipples.com, and I'm bringing him on because I've learned a lot from him in the past, from his audio course and his podcast about how to actually get more money out of what we already get, right? So if you've read the book, The Richest Man in Babylon, the idea is to pay yourself first. Well, Chris goes much farther and much deeper into that, and he's all about cash flow. And I would say that he is a finance advisor without being a financial planner type of thing. So he's not going to tell you what stocks to put your money in or what mutual funds to put your money in, but he will actually help you keep more of your money by finding ways to save it, by finding ways to save on your taxes, by giving you ideas that up till now have been privilege of the rich, you know, because like the rich, they're not afraid of loopholes. I mean, they know all the loopholes because they can afford to pay for advisors. And Chris is like the advisor to the everyman. Is that right, Chris? Is that a fair portrayal?
Yeah, like I would say, like I'm kind of like an anti-financial advisor, if anything. Like I'm an absolute mutual fund hater. You know, I believe that if anybody's going to invest in anything, they're going to invest in things they can control and do themselves. You know, which is what you're teaching. I mean, so yeah, I mean, I started out being the traditional financial advisor 17 years ago and did that for 4 years, but it didn't take me long to realize that even after decades of advice, people were still not any better off financially if they followed that kind of crappy advice. And I learned, you know, with people that were like friends of mine that were millionaires and things like that, you know, they didn't believe that advice. They thought that advice was stupid about, you know, saving for the long haul and diversifying in all these different funds, which really isn't diversification, right? It's just putting your money all in the same kind of asset class and just hoping and praying that you're in it for the long haul, however long that is. Even if you lose money, oh, well, you know, you're in the market, so stay in for another 15 years and maybe you'll make your money back and all that kind of crap that you're told by financial advisors, right? And so, yeah, I left that about, after 4 years doing that, I left it, vowed never to do it again, was able to retire in 2006 when I was 28 years old. And then, of course, went through the recession, actually went from millionaire to upside down millionaire, was over $1 million in debt when that hit, and was able to dig back out of that without going through bankruptcy and was able to retire again about 2 years ago, this time with a lot more streams of income and a lot more safeguards in place to make sure that I keep it coming in.
So, I mean, I'm interested in knowing how you did that both times. How did you retire?
Yeah, the first time was pretty accidental, you know, because it was March of 2006 that I went to a seminar that some of these guys put on, right? And they were talking about how financial advisors basically suck, you know, and I was the only financial advisor in the room, by the way. But I couldn't deny the truth. I mean, when they said, hey, high risk creates high returns. Well, if that's true, like, how does a 90% chance of losing create a 90% chance of winning? That's dumb. Like, no, you want lowest risk possible to create the highest returns, right? And things like that. And so I vowed never to teach about money again. And so I just basically said, I'm going to do mortgages and I'm going to teach ballroom dancing at the local university. And so I did. I was starting to do that. But then I wanted to get to know more about what these guys knew, right? So I started to learn more what they did. And one really rocked my world because, you know, there's people still coming to me asking me financial questions, even though I said, hey, I don't want to do that. But I was learning different strategies. I learned about leverage, right? Like, hey, could I use the equity from my house to create more returns and things like that? You know, and especially when it was focused around cash flow, that was one of the biggest shift in me was when it wasn't about, you know, how do you compound your interest and things like that, but how does this actually create real streams of income, real cash flow? And I remember like people were asking me questions and one of my friends said, hey, do you like doing mortgages? And I said, you know, I like teaching them, but I seriously hate doing paperwork. I hate when I tell people, hey, it'll be like 3 or 4 weeks before we got approvals and we're done here. So hang tight. And then the next day they're like calling me up saying, hey, are we going to close yet? They're calling all hours of the day, right? Like that was annoying for me. And so he said, well, why don't you find somebody who actually does like doing that? And in a scarcity world like I was in as a financial advisor, because financial advisors teach out of scarcity, right? It's always lack and never enough and all that kind of stuff. Well, I never thought about splitting commissions and things like that. When he said that, I was like, wow, I could do that. And so, I found a guy that was really good at doing the paperwork, didn't mind doing the underwriting, but wasn't a big marketing kind of guy, right? Good guy with the integrity. So I just said, hey, if I basically spoon feed people to you to where they're ready to do it, I just need your help to do the paperwork. Would you split me in 50-50? And the guy's like, yeah, of course. I'm like, sweet. And so I would educate people for maybe half an hour to an hour max about, ways they could leverage their mortgage and refinance and free up cash flow and stuff. And then they're like, great. Well, who do we go talk to? I'm like, go talk to this guy. and next thing you know, like a month or so later, I get a check for like $1,000 or $1,500. I'm like, that's like $1,000 an hour. That's way better. This is great. And so I started doing it with other companies. I even did it with a wholesale jeweler. They would pay 5% on any sale. And I was like, hey, these guys are like 2-3 times cheaper than the malls. Use these guys instead. They're great. Or, there's other companies. And between these 4 or 5 different companies, I was seriously making $4 or $5 grand a month, like passive income. Like I was doing very little to get it. I was only working a few hours a week to make that money. And that's when it hit me, because at that point, this is 2006. I only had 2 kids at the time, so it was like by July of 2006, I'm like, dang, that was only 4 months after I quit being a financial advisor. And I thought I'd have to work forever and save every little penny and be cheap till I was 40 to be able to retire. And here I am doing it 4 months later with no real money in the markets, right? Mm-hmm. And just purely because of referrals. And so that was the first way I did it. And then I started building in other things like real estate income and things like that, right? By the way, at the same time, I was actually stock coaching and teach people how to trade stocks and options. So every money I was making from that was purely gravy. It was just like, well, that's extra, $6 grand or so a month. I can go and invest myself. I was having fun with it. And, so anyways, this last time around though, to be able to hit that retirement, then I decided to create very multiple streams of income. It's not just from referrals, but I was doing it through like my podcast, could I get paid for advertising and things like that? Could I get paid from, certain affiliates, or could I get paid from, monthly programs I have for clients and things like that, where, it's more system based, versus me, my own time and attention. And,
right.
And pretty soon, same thing. But this time it wasn't like, $4 or $5 grand a month, because I've got 8 kids now with a blended family. So $4 or $5 grand a month's nothing. So for my family, I've got to make at least 15 to 20 grand a month minimum to even make ends meet. So, my number had to go up quite a bit. That's why it took me until 2 years ago to do it again, even after the whole mess of the recession. But yeah, that's really what it was. Investments, business streams, things like that. I just found multiple ways to do it, and it's awesome. Truly the key to freedom is creating that cash flow.
So how do you classify yourself? Like if someone, hey, what do you do? What would you answer to that?
It depends on who's talking to me. If it's a business owner, I'll say I'm a cash flow expert. But most of the time I just refer myself as an anti-financial advisor, because I'm basically against everything financial advisors teach.
Okay. All right. So our audience is made up of individual investors, with a slant towards, selling options. So
yeah.
We focus more on more passive strategies, covered calls, puts,
right.
iron condors, credit spreads, those kind of things where, we have the probabilities in our favor. We put them on, and then we have the time to go do other things while the trades are working for us. And they're not to the point where we have to sit there all day long, monitor them, buy, sell, like a day trading kind of thing. So yeah. A lot of our people are, they're already investors. So they already have some kind of amount of money to put in. But then we also have a bunch of people who are trying to get in. So they're still working a day job, and they're still saving up money, and they're still trying to put together an amount of money so that they can go and open an account and start trading. For those type of people, could you give us a couple of hints of ways that they could generate more cash flow from what they already have?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of reminds me of a situation like I actually have one client right now where, funny enough, he actually is kind of in a similar situation like yourself. He actually teaches people how to trade options. And he came to me, he says, okay, Chris, like, I'm great at this. And his strategy is more day trading, and he does, covered calls and things like that, right? But he's kind of like, for myself personally, like, I love this. I make good money with this, but I need other streams of income. Like, I can't just have this. Like, this is a good active stream, but I want some passive streams too that I don't have to work so hard for. And so I was like, okay, cool. Let's look at stuff. And so we started looking at things like, do we do things with real estate, or how about like oil and gas? I'll tell you, like, especially if you work another job, you get crapped on when it comes to taxes. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, my business owner clients, they love it because we can do all kinds of things, strategies to minimize taxes. But, I mean, using IRAs is a joke when it comes to, because you don't really save on tax with IRAs. You're just delaying the inevitable. Especially right now, where we have some of the best tax benefits right now. We're on some of the lowest taxes we've ever had in the last century. It's kind of tough to say, oh yeah, let's delay tax till later, because taxes are going to keep going down, right? All that kind of stuff. So people, most of the time when they come to me and they've had, they make maybe several $100,000 a year at their job, or they're doctors and things like that, right? And they're looking for options to do, like definitely options can be great, but a lot of times we look for other things too, of like, hey, well, could we do oil investments where we can write off everything that we're investing that year, to bring your income down and stuff. And heck, if you're like, I want to get out of these stupid self-directed IRAs because they're telling me all what I can and can't invest in. Cool. Well, maybe we can do some things to offset that. Maybe we do like conservation easement strategy where we donate land and you can write off 4 times whatever you donate, and that offsets the penalty and taxes if you're not 59 and a half, like things like that. That's kind of stuff that I usually run into with situations like this. I mean, it's the biggest thing is like, how do we keep as much money as possible, and how do we get the money working for us as much to generate that cash flow, And I think it's fun.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like, so one of our earlier episodes is, I call it the 5-finger strategy, where you have to have 5 different sources of income if you want to be truly financially independent. Because when you're trading, if that's the only thing you're doing, if you're trading options or whatever, if that's the only thing you're doing, then you have that stress on the top of your head all the time that I have to make enough to pay the bills. And it's not like where you're working a job, right, where you go in and that you're in the office, you're going to get paid no matter what, as long as the company's still in business. So being a trader is kind of like a salesperson or a real estate agent or something like that, where you have to make the money in order to get it. And there's that pressure on you all the time. So if you do diversify and if you have other streams of income, whether it's real estate or whatever, you can, it takes the pressure off of you, and then you actually trade better in the same regard. Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of why that guy came to me too. He's like, okay, I'm rocking the options world, but how can I like get some pressure off me? And even like from a business standpoint, and I tell this to business owners all the time. I mean, even people that are in like network marketing, like it's like, I'll get people in network marketing. They're like, oh, I'm set for life because I've got, they might have like hundreds of thousands of people in their downline. They're making, what they refer to as residual income, right? But I'll tell you, I've watched those same people lose their businesses, like lose everything, And I tell them, like, how powerful is it if you can work because you want to, not because you have to? That you've got other streams coming in that you say, hey, I don't need to do any more business. I don't need to do this. I'm just doing it because I think it's fun. And I think that's the way investing should be. I think that's the way everything in our life should be, is like, hey, I'm doing this because it's fun. And I'll tell you my experience, even with the people I train to do trading with stocks and options and any other type of investment. Anytime somebody said, I think this is just fun, I don't care if I even make money, I think it's a bonus I make money. Whenever they say that, I'll tell you, like when I've followed them over the years, they just get better and better at that investment or in that business. Like they just, like things work out. Where some people, if they're just doing it for the paycheck, it's like, well, how's that different than having a job? That sucks. So it's true. Like you want to have multiple streams of income. You want to take that pressure off yourself because you never know. I mean, things might change. You might have to have to call an audible. That's what happened to me. That's what I did wrong before the last recession, is that I was kind of banking. In fact, I cut off a lot of those strategies, a lot of those income streams right before the recession. Because I remember I was coming out of retirement. I was starting to teach people how to get out of the rat race. And I remember the guys I was working with, his partners said, hey, well, we can't have you doing these other side activities. We need you focused here. So I'm like, all right, to be a team player, quote unquote, and, and for the mission, all right, I'll cut off these streams of income, which was so dumb. It was idiotic to do that. And it got me from a place of freedom to a place of bondage. And so, I mean, cash flow is really the key to freedom, because when you have more cash flow, there's more options. And when you have more options, that's when you have freedom.
Right. Now, so you don't think that, you've always just said that, hey, you hate financial planners. So you don't think that they have any value at all?
No, not at all. In fact, I think most financial planners have a good heart, like their heart's in the right place. What's wrong with financial advising is that they've been sold a bill of goods and they're taught to regurgitate it back to you, right? I mean, think about it. I mean, a bank, if you look at the rules of a bank, what does a bank want you to do when you give them money, right? They want you to put money as often as possible, give them as much as possible, keep it in there as long as possible, take out as little possible, and then take all the risk yourself, right? That's basically what a bank will have you do. Now, what are we taught to do with investing from the traditional point? They'll tell you, hey, put in money all the time, like every paycheck, put it in all the time because you need that money going in. You need to start stuffing in lots of money to live on the interest, right? And they'll tell you, hey, put in as much as possible because, man, look how much it'll accelerate. And as long as possible, man, that miracle of compound interest, oh, it's awesome, right? Like, imagine what your money will look like in 20,000 years, making 7% off the S&P 500 index, off the spider, right? Just doing that, that's after all the fees are taken out by your financial advisors and stuff, and then they're telling you, yeah, and don't take any money out. Like, you got to live on less than interest. It always seemed dumb to me. I was like, wait, most of the time you see right now with most advice, they'll say don't take out more than 2 or 3% of your account. So if you're a millionaire, you've got $1 million saved up in a 401k or an IRA, they're basically telling you to live below the poverty line at $20,000 or $30,000 a year. How is that right? I think that's stupid. Right. Mm-hmm. So you have to, really, if I actually ran the numbers, if somebody wanted to retire in the next 20 years and you want to have a $60,000 a year lifestyle, which is not great, that's $5,000 a month, and you factor for inflation, and based on the current, like just the typical mutual funds and stuff, like the ones that are in the marketplace right now, you would have to save, I'm kidding you not, like to adjust for inflation, everything, and to pull out what they recommend pulling out, you've got to seriously save about $10,000 a month for the next 20 years to be able to retire at a $60,000 a year lifestyle. And that's just ridiculous, So it's not that the financial advisors are trying to deceive you, but they've been sold everything from banks and financial institutions that are teaching everybody what's supposed to be the rules of money. Mm-hmm. But what you've been teaching and what I've been teaching as well is that, no, like, we got to throw this thing upside down and on its head, is that, no, when we take the investments under our own control, we take less risk, not more, because the banks want you to take all the risk, right? That's why mutual fund companies like Fidelity and whatnot, they're not going to tell you like, hey, we're going to take some risk for you. If you lose money, we do too. It's like, no, they take their guaranteed fees no matter what, right? Whether you lose money or make money, they're making money. They take no risk. You're the one that takes all the risk. And that's why you've been taught high risk creates high returns, because they want you to actually believe that you have to take all the risk. And that's just bull crap. You don't.
Yep. So in your, like for your clients and whatnot, what type of financial products do you recommend?
It really depends. Everybody has their own recipe, right? I mentioned earlier, we talked about, finding things that light you up, right? Like, what are the investments that you're just like, wow, that'd be fun. It could be, if it's options trading, sweet. Let's make that like your active investment. You're totally, rocking it, and building up your cash and everything possible to make more. Then outside of that, cool. Maybe look for passive streams. And that could be in like different aspects of real estate. It could be in oil and gas. It could be with different notes or funds, I know funds out there that'll pay you consistently, 10% a year, but paid out monthly. So if you got $100,000, they'll pretty much pay you about 830, what is it? Like 830 some odd dollars a month, right? Just on that. Don't have to do anything. You don't have to worry about it. You just let them take care of it. They're investing in their own stuff.
So what type of funds are those?
That's that one particular company. That one's one where they invest in mortgage, like delinquent mortgages, and they help people refinance. And so they basically just buy up huge portfolios of mortgages from banks and then try to refinance people and keep them in their home or help them sell their home and split the equity and that kind of stuff. And like the one company I've referred people to, like they're actually report to the SEC every year, they're monitored by them, but their own portfolio usually makes at least 39, 40, 50% a year. But they'll pay investors, people that basically loan money to them, like 10% paid out monthly.
Wow.
Not huge. That's like, for me, that's the low end of the return scale. I like higher. I know other funds that might do 12% or more if you let it reinvest, turnkey real estate. I like turnkey because it's very hands off. You don't have to deal with anything, but you get to collect the checks. I mean, some of those can easily do at least 10 or 12% a year. And that's just cash on cash. That's not including the tax benefits or appreciation or the fact that they're paying your mortgage down for you, which could lead to easily 20, 30, 40% year over year cash on cash return,
So what would be an example of turnkey real estate?
Yeah. I mean, give an example. Like recently I bought a property in Memphis, Tennessee. And actually I didn't even have to find the property. I just used a turnkey provider that found the properties and said, here's a list. Which one do you like? I said, oh, that one looks sweet. That one's paying a 14% cash on cash rate of return. So I'll take that one. Bought that after interest rates kicked in a little bit. When the interest rates climbed a little bit, it ended up being more like 11% cash on cash. So I basically all was said and done, I put about $30,000 down, but my cash flow was $270 a month. Mm-hmm. And then the next are $120 a month is going towards paying down a mortgage. But that's like phantom income, right? That's like, just building, net worth. And that becomes more important when I sell the property down the road. But the cool thing is actually just recently we just raised the rent on the renters another $55 a month and they signed a 1-year lease again. So now the ROI is now jumping up. Now it's like $320 or so a month, right? So now my ROI is like about 13, 14%.
Nice. And how many of those do you have?
I got a few of those actually. And then we even got like things like, multifamily. I mean, you can do things like fourplexes. You can even go bigger because if you got a lot of cash, hard thing is, dropping like, $30,000 or $20,000 down as a down payment. If you've got like $500,000, that's a lot of properties to buy. Mm-hmm. So better is you can go like the fourplex route, which you might put down like $120,000 or something on, and make money off that. And in fact, I just had a deal recently that came across and I was already leveraged for my own money, but there was an offer that came across for like a 55 plus senior community where it was like, I can't remember how many units were in that deal. It was like $2.65 million down payment. Mm-hmm. But the cash flow was already paying because they were already in it. There was already people paying for it. The cash flow was already $311,000 a year. So $2.65 million down for $311,000 a year, passive coming in. Right. And, the thing that was cool about that is they're still raising the rents. So they're still trying to make more and more cash flow on that deal. And I actually ended up sending it out to my clients. I'm like, hey guys, like maybe, I knew a few of them could do it by themselves, but they probably weren't, wanting to go in that big. So I'm like, hey, partner up. Like this is an awesome deal. That's almost a 12% rate of return from a big deal like this. I mean, for that much cash, that's hard to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's not including any appreciation or anything else. That was just purely from the cash on cash returns,
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's just that I think for most people, and I'm sure your clients included, unless you're really tapped in, it's really hard to find these type of investments. And then it's hard to know if it's a good investment or not, right?
Exactly. That's why you have to have like the right relationships, the right connections and stuff. Cause I didn't have to find those properties. They basically found me, so that's what's beautiful about it is that, there's an overabundance of deals out there. That's why I tell people, like, don't just do something because it'll pay you a lot of money. Like, do something because it actually is exciting to you beyond the money, right? There's plenty of things you can do. There's millions and millions of ways to make millions of dollars.
I'm sure you know that, but there are so many people that would be like, well, I don't know any of them. I can't find any of them. Where do I find all these deals?
Well, and that's why I teach on my podcast show, like the Chris Miles Money Show, because like recently I had a really popular episode with a guy that he actually had him on my show. I think it was like 5 years ago, like early on, and he was talking about real estate and whatnot. And it was cool. Well, I started seeing some of his emails, and his emails started turning towards short-term rentals, like Airbnb rentals, right? And I had a few clients who were like, hey, Chris, what do you think about doing like Airbnb? Like, what about buying a property and doing Airbnb on it? Which I'm like, that could be cool. But this guy, he's like, hey, you know what? You don't even have to buy the property. What if you go and you go to a building, like a apartment building and say, hey, I know you've got a ton of these units up for rent right now. How about I just rent all of these from you? Let's say that's like 6 of them that are unrented, right? I'll just rent all these 6 units from you. I'm going to sublease them to somebody else, but don't worry. I'm going to be doing all the cleaning. It's going to get cleaned every week. We'll even clean the vents that you won't do, or that your own tenants won't do. We'll keep this in probably better condition than any of your other tenants. And you're going to get paid every single month, and you don't have any more vacancies. And then you go and you just furnish the place, and then you start collecting in like a couple $1,000 a month of, passive income from the Airbnb rentals, right? And you have your own team that's coming in that's managing the property, so you're not managing it yourself. And I mean, that kind of stuff is, I mean, that episode right there when he's like, yeah, you could drop 10 grand in furnishing a place and then you end up making that money back within a year and a half. And then it's just, you're cash flowing, net at least $1,000 a month, above and beyond your rent payment. I mean, when you think about that, that's like a 50% rate, year over year rate of return. That's pretty incredible, more of an active investment. But that's the thing. Like there's so many options out there you can do. And so it's just a matter of, one, figuring out what lights you up. And that's a lot of times what I have to discuss with people. It's like, all right, let's investigate some of these and see which ones you kind of lean towards and then create a roadmap from there, a game plan to get you out of that rat race so you can quit that job or work because you want to, not because you have to,
Okay. Now you also have ideas on how to help people with their taxes, right? So like if you were to give our audience some tips on ways that they could reduce some of their taxes.
Yeah, it depends where you're coming from. If you're already a business owner, you've got lots of opportunities, right? Sadly, most accountants don't teach you that much of what to do. For example, I like this year, you're allowed to pay your kids $12,000 a year, your minor children, right? $12,000 a year, tax free. So I remember I had a woman in California that she had 6 kids and she was only paying them $6,000 a year. When she found this out, she started paying them $6,000 a year, saved her $13,000 a year in taxes. And the cool thing is she's still using that same money to pay for the same crap that she was paying for before, right? Schooling, extracurriculars, all that kind of stuff, college savings if they want to save for college or whatever, but that's like tax-free money. So if you can get yourself in the business owner status, and if you're not there, say you're working for a company or whatever, right? And then it's like, okay, can we get you to professional investor status? And that can be tough to do. I mean, there's things to do, and it might not be you. You might have to get a spouse to do it, depending on who works the least. Mm-hmm. You kind of have to, work. You have to usually work about an average of 15 hours a week to hit the professional investor status. But if you do, you can actually start claiming losses on your taxes, and making money there. And so there's things with that. I mentioned a few of those things from the investment world. There's like the oil and gas. You invest $100,000 in oil and gas this year, you usually can write off at least 85,000 of that. So if you're like, hey, I'm making $250,000 a year, I want to get down to the next tax bracket. Cool. Maybe you dump $100,000 oil and gas and get the tax write-off this year. But then starting in the second year, you start getting cash flow from the investment, and possibly even a 200-300% rate of return after, 3 to 5 years when they reposition and sell off their land shares that you're a part owner in and stuff. Or do you do that conservation easement strategy where you donate land? Like I mentioned before, you write off 4 times the amount you donate. So if your land share is $50,000, you write off $200,000 off your income tax. Things like that. I mean, there's so many cool things you can do, just depending on where you're coming from. The sad thing is if you're an employee, your options are pretty limited. It's pretty much either get to that professional investor category or do a few of those, types of strategies, those investment strategies.
So now let me go back. And you said, well, for you can pay your kids if you have a business. And now obviously the kids have to do something in the business where you have to be able to say that, they're providing some type of service. But then you also mentioned that you could pay them $12,000 this year. Now I've heard of that and I do it with my children, but we pay them $6,000.
Yeah. That was kind of the case up until this last year, in 2018. Yeah, it used to be 6,000, but then recently with the whole, Trump tax plan, they said, hey, you can actually do 12, with your kids. It still has to be justifiable. You can't just pay them for doing nothing, right?
Right.
You would pay them like you'd pay any adult for, if it's cleaning or if it's, helping you with marketing if you're in business, right? And that kind of thing. I mean, obviously, you've got to be a business owner of some sort. It could be filing, it could be computer work. I mean, have them help you build a web page. If they're better at that than other people, you can easily pay them at least $12,000 a year,
Exactly.
All kinds of stuff. It just depends on your business, the nature of your business, and what you could do. I mean, the challenge with me is I've got 8 kids. Trying to figure out how to pay them all that much is pretty tough.
And this is only for this year, or is it for until they change the tax code? Until they change it, yeah. Okay. So there's no time period that says, okay, this will be enacted for the next 3 years or something. And then it has to be extended. I mean, but like I said, like in 2 years we have a new president and new tax bill comes through and who knows, right? But yeah, in the meantime, we can definitely exploit that fact. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's one strategy. Another one that's pretty cool that a lot of accountants never teach because a lot of them just, by the way, if you ever have an accountant says, oh, I'm conservative, right? What it really means is they're saying I'm ignorant because they just don't know the tax laws. When they say they're conservative, it's because they don't want to go and learn any new strategies. So they just tell you the same old crap, right?
Like for example, there's one, and in fact, I had an accountant that told one of my clients, you cannot do that. That's against the tax code. So I found freaking articles, like even in like New York Times and stuff, for like this corporate rent strategy is an example, right? Where if you have a corporation, especially if you work from home, and heck, even if you don't work from home, even if you just have a home office, right? You could actually pay to use your house, say for one day's use, almost like you would for a hotel, right? Like if you ever booked a hotel, like a meeting space or something like that, whether you had people coming there or maybe just meeting with a potential client or whatever it might be, right? You say, hey, all right, I'm going to book this hotel meeting space. Yes, I'll pay for the wireless internet. Yes, I'll pay for this. Heck, why not pay for lunch too, or catering, right? When you start to add it all up, it's a lot of money for a day's use of a hotel. Well, it's not too uncommon. You can pretty much see like a day's use of a hotel could easily be at least for cross country. It's different state by state. For cross country, like $1,250, let's just say, for a day's use of a hotel. Well, you could do that same thing by renting your corporation, renting your house from you personally for that one day. Now, if you know about rental laws, like you don't get taxed on rent until it passes 14 days in that year, right? So let's just say you only pick one day out of the month that you do something, and it could be something with clients, it could be something not, right? It could be you're doing a planning meeting inside your own house or whatever, right? But whatever it might be, you basically use your home for that day's use of business purpose. Well, if you do that for 12 days a year, that's $15,000 that you've been paid personally from your corporation. So that's a write-off from your company, right? You're getting a company write-off, but that income is income tax free because you haven't surpassed the 14 days. So depending on your tax bracket, if you're in a pretty high tax bracket, that could save you at least $5,000 or $6,000. In fact, I tested it once. I had an accountant who forgot to count it, and I said, hey, go back. This thing right here, this expense, this income should not be counted as income, but it was like 11 or 12 days of those corporate rent payments, right? And so he put it back in. He's like, oh, let me adjust that. And seriously, it was a $6,000 savings that year.
Okay, so let me get this clear. If you have a property that you rent out and you collect income, you collect rental income on that, whether it's a house or a car or whatever.
This is actually for your own home you live in. Right.
Okay, so it's only for your home?
Yep, just for your home. Yeah, not talking about the rental properties. This is just for your own house.
And if it doesn't exceed 14 days, there's no income tax on that?
Correct. Yep. And then the tax usually, if you go over 14 days, it's passive income tax, and you're taxed like you are for real estate. But as long as you don't go over 14 days a year, that's income tax free to you.
Wow. I didn't know that one. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome. Like I have actually one friend, he has a bigger home, and he's like, hey, my accountant has me justifying $1,500 a month or $1,500 for that day's use. So he's like, I'm going all the way up to the 14 days. And so he's basically writing off like $21,000 a year. That's saving him probably at least $7,000 in taxes that year. And you're still getting paid. That's the cool thing. You're still paying yourself. But rather than, paying yourself and you have to pay income tax and social security tax and everything else, you're taking that totally income tax free.
And so how would you have to still report it as income, but the accountant should know how to handle that, right?
Yeah, you have to let them know, of course, that income is from, like however many days it were in that year for that rent payment. Okay. You just have to tell them that, because, if you don't, then they will just count as normal income, right? So, right, but yeah. Right. And they can use, if they know the strategy, obviously they'll see, oh, there's that rent payment coming out of your business and there's the income. Perfect.
Awesome. Cool. So I think those two tips could save people a lot of money, but both of them, obviously, you have to have a corporation. And I think a couple episodes ago, we talked with another one of our traders who had gone ahead and started trading inside of his corporation for asset protection. That was the main reason for asset protection, but then he also was able to take out all these expenses as deductions, and then the losses were also classified as differently than on his personal. So that helped out a lot as well. So definitely, I think it'd be good for most traders, depending on how much they actually have and how much they could actually save, but they could probably easily do this and open a corporation and just do all that stuff out of it. But that's really cool. That's really cool stuff. Is there a way where people can get a hold of you? Because we're out of time here, but I know that, we could keep talking, and I'm sure you have lots of other strategies as well. But is there a way for our listeners to find you and get a hold of you?
Yeah, like I mentioned, like you can check out the Chris Miles Money Show. That's on iTunes, or you can find online that way. There's also my website, moneyripples.com. That's MONEYRIPPLES.com. And yeah, I mean, and even if you have questions specifically, you might just say, hey, let me send an email, Chris. You just send an email to Chris with a CH. So Chris@moneyripples.com.
Cool. Thank you. And before you go, I got one last question for you. So let's say, you ran into somebody and you really wanted to impress them with your financial knowledge, right? Maybe this person is a big whale type person and you're like, okay, I want this guy as a client. I'm going to give him one tip that's just going to knock his socks off. What would that be?
Oh, that's not an easy answer because I always adapt it to the person. So for me, usually it's mostly listening. All I have to do is usually ask you a series of questions and just find out like where you are. And usually I'll find out something like, oh, hey, have you ever considered this? So it could be like, like conservation easements, right? Like, hey, here's a way you can write off 4 times, and get massive savings if they're like, if taxes are a big pain, or, hey, passive income, you want more of that? Like, dude, you can totally rock your world by making passive income over here and doing this kind of stuff. I mean, it's not hard for me. I mean, it really just depends on their situation and where they're at. But, I would say probably for me to knock their socks off, I usually do less. I usually do less talking and more listening.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. All right, Chris. Well, this has been an interesting conversation. Those of you who are looking for more passive streams of income, that are looking to save money on their taxes even, do reach out to Chris. Like you said, there are lots and lots of ways to make money. We just have to find them. So appreciate it, Chris. Thank you for spending some time with us.
It's an honor. Thanks for having me on your show.
All right. Take care.
All right. See you.
All stocks are not created equal. We've analyzed thousands of optionable stocks to find the very best ones to trade options on. Lucky for you, you can just download the list for free. Get it at simonsaysoptions.com/stocks. Again, that's simonsaysoptions.com/stocks.